Of all the differences between German and English, this is probably the biggest and I'd say the most important one to know about. Get this right and you'll find it a lot easier to structure your German sentences the right way. Grüß Gott, hallo. Ich bin Billy Badger und das ist Bausteine 1. Herzlich willkommen. This week we are thinking about word order, where our words go in German sentences. And of course, we need to remember that there are three different sorts of sentences. We've got the normal statements, of course, as well as two kinds of questions. We've got ones where we answer with a yes or a no, and we've got others where we need to give maybe a bit more information. In each case, the most important thing for us to consider is where the verb goes. But we'll also want to know where all of those other bits go too, so we'll talk about these as well. Let's turn our attention first to statements. And here we need to know that for now, our verb is always going to be the second element in the sentence and never anywhere else. So no matter what you do with all of those other bits of a sentence, you just need to make sure that the verb is in the second spot. And here's our second rule. The subject is going to be right next to the verb. This is often just before the verb, so we have sentences like these. Er spielt gut. Sie liest viel. Wir wandern gern. Or ich bin draußen. In all of these sentences, the verb is right where it should be, in the second position, and the subject is right next to it in the first position. And for now, that's where it's always going to be. Of course, we have other elements in a sentence in that space after the verb, and these are the elements that we are going to be concentrating on in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. We've got time phrases, place phrases, objects, and more. So we are going to construct our basic German sentences like this. We start off with a subject and then comes the verb, which gives us information about what the subject is doing. We'll follow this up with the word gern if we are communicating that we like doing the thing that the verb suggests we're doing. And then, if we want to, or if we need to, we can say when it's happening and then where it's happening. And if we need one, we've got an object, and often it is in the final position in a sentence. And this is quite a bit different to English, so make sure you make a note of this when you're coming up with your own sentences. Let's look at some simple examples. We'll start off with a sentence we've already had. Wir wandern gern. Verb in the second spot, followed by gern to say that we enjoy hiking. And then we could add maybe im Sommer to say that we like hiking in summer. And then we could follow this up with where we like to hike. So we can have different sentences like these. Wir wandern gern im Sommer in den Bergen. Wir wandern gern am Wochenende an der Küste. Or wir wandern gern in den Ferien im Wald. But often we don't want to start off with a subject. Sometimes, and we do this in English too, sometimes we want to start off with a time phrase. And this is where we need to remember our first rule, that the verb stays in the second position. Here's what we do. Starting with our sentence, wir wandern gern am Wochenende in den Bergen, let's move the time phrase, this one, into the first position so that we're saying at the weekend we like to hike in the mountains, which maybe sounds a bit more natural. But if we just move it over into the first position without doing anything else, this shunts our verb over into the third position, which is not good. So if we start our sentences with anything other than the subject, then the subject needs to be moved over to the other side of the verb, since that is our second rule. The subject and the verb stay together. For now, they're always going to be right next to each other. Or instead of the time phrase, you could move the place phrase into the first position. And here, the same thing happens. With the place phrase first, the subject can't stay before the verb. It has to come after it, right in next to the verb on the other side. Everything else stays in the same order. So you can vary your sentences quite a bit by just varying the first element. But of course, only if it makes sense to do so, if you're trying to emphasize a particular element. Okay, so this brings us now to the structure of questions. And this is where the German system is super easy. Let's start with a statement about these musicians. Sie spielen gut. They play well. To change this into a question, we just swap the order of the subject and the verb. Instead of Sie spielen gut, we end up with the sentence Spielen Sie gut? Which requires a yes or a no answer. This is, of course, a little bit more complicated in English because we need two verbs. We need to ask, do they play well? But this is not necessary in German because we remember that for now, our subjects have just got one verb in the first spot, but still right next to the subject. Let's take another example. I could ask, liest sie gern? Does she like reading? And this is easy to answer because we just swap the subject and the verb around. We'll say either ja, sie liest gern, if she likes to read, or nein, sie liest nicht gern, if she doesn't like to read. But we need to be more careful if we are talking to someone rather than about them because, like in English, we need to use different pronouns in our answer. I can ask you, for example, lesen Sie gern? Do you like reading? I'm using the formal pronoun Sie because I'm talking to you. But in your answer, you need to use ich because, of course, you're giving me information about yourself. Let's try these examples. You choose the most appropriate answer. Trinken Sie gern Bier? Do you like drinking beer? Ja, ich trinke gern Bier. Und nein, ich trinke nicht gern Bier. Hören Sie gern Musik? Do you like listening to music? Ja, ich höre gern Musik. Nein, ich höre nicht gern Musik. Or maybe, wandern Sie gern? Do you like hiking? Ja, ich wandere gern. Oh nein, ich wandere nicht gern. And these are, of course, questions that we can only answer with ja or nein, yes or no. And sometimes we want more information. We might want to know, where do you like hiking? Or when do you like hiking? Or maybe even why do you like hiking? This is where our W question words come in. And we just put them out in front of our normal yes-no question. So nothing too complicated. So the structure of your information questions will look like this. Information question word, followed by the verb, then the subject, followed by any of those other usual elements in the usual order. And so here's a list of some of perhaps the most useful information question words. Of course, you'll find a complete list in your textbook, Bausteine 1. We've got wann, it asks about when and requires a time answer. Was asks about what. Wo asks about where and requires a location answer. Warum asks about why and requires a reason answer. Woher asks about origins, where someone or something comes from. Wohin asks about destinations, where something or someone is going to. Answers to many of these questions are, of course, beyond the scope of what we're trying to achieve this week, but there are videos on them in the description below if you're interested. Let's have a go at answering some questions anyway, and I'll give you a question along with the information you need to answer it. Remember again that I'll be using Sie in the question for you, but you'll use Ich along with the correct verb form in your answer, since I'm talking to you and you are talking about yourself. Here we go. Wo studieren Sie? Was studieren Sie? Wann lernen Sie? Woher kommen Sie? Was lesen Sie gern? Wo wohnen Sie? Was trinken Sie gern? Wie groß sind Sie? Okay, how did you go? I've got some answers down below in the description if you want to check them out, and there's a much more detailed explanation in your textbook Bausteine 1 along with a lot of examples to practice too. So head over right now to chapter 5 and get started, and I'll see you next time. Danke fürs Zuschauen, auf Wiedersehen und tschüss.